This is the last part in the 4-part series where you learn to solve the Rubik's Cube blindfolded. In parts 1 and 2, you learned everything you needed to memorize the cube, and in part 3, you learned everything you needed to actually solve the cube. So in part 4, I'm going to do a full example solve combining everything together, and then give you some helpful tips for getting started with blindfolded solving. So let's get going. Alright, so this is the scramble for the example. Just go ahead and scramble your cube with it so you can follow along. Awesome. So we start off by getting our white center on the top and our green center on the front. And then first we're going to memorize the corners. And so we look back at our buffer and we start our first cycle by looking at where that needs to go. So this is the blue of the red and yellow corner. So that goes to here, which is QRST. So we have the letter T. And then the piece that's here is the yellow of the orange and green. So that goes to right here, which is U. So the letters T, U, what word could we use for that? I use a tutu, like a little dress thing. So I could have that. And then the piece that's there is yellow and green and red. So that would go to here because yellow, green, and red. And that is UV. And then here is the orange of the yellow and blue. And that goes to back here because orange and yellow and blue. So right here is E, F, G, H. So I have V and then H. So maybe a word that I could use for that might be a vehicle. So maybe I could have like a tutu driving a vehicle of some kind. And then the piece that's here is white and with orange and green. So white, orange, and green. So just here. And that is D. And then the piece that's there is white and blue and red. So that goes to back here because white, blue, red. And that's A, B. So we have D, B. So maybe I could do like dabbing. So my memorization to this point would be a tutu was in a vehicle while dabbing. And then this is the blue of the white and orange. And oh, that goes back to my buffer. And so since that was the first cycle, I don't memorize the letter for that. But there's actually a piece that we didn't reach in our tracing. And that piece is right here. This corner is twisted. And so in order to solve it, I'm going to need to cycle break into one of the sides on the piece. So maybe I could choose to break into right here, cycle break to here. That is the letter A, B, C. So I have C. And then the piece that's here is red of the green and white. So that goes right here, which is M. So CM, a word I could use for that would maybe be cucumber. And that actually ends the second cycle because that second letter there, the M, is on the same piece that we cycle broke to because we cycle broke to C. So that corner twist there just gives us 2 letters. So far our corner memo is a TU tutu was in a VH vehicle while DB dabbing at the CM cucumber. So that could be our memorization for corners. And so now we go on to memorizing the edges. And we start off by looking at our buffer and we look at what piece is there and where it needs to go, just like with corners. So it's the white and green. So that goes to right here because white and green. So that's the letter A, B, C. So we have a C. And then the piece that's here is blue and red. And so that goes back blue and red. So right here, which is QRST. So we have CT. Maybe we could have a cat. And then the piece that's here is yellow and blue. And so that goes to yellow and blue. So right here. And that's U, V, W. And then the piece that's there is orange and yellow. And so that goes to orange and yellow. So right here, which is E, F, G. So we have a W and a G. What word could we use for that? Maybe we could use a wig. So we would have CT cat was wearing a WG wig. And then the piece that's here is green and orange. So that would go to green and orange. So right here. And that is IJKL. So we would have an L. And then the piece that's there is white and orange. So that would go on the top because white and orange. So right here, and that's A, B, C, D. So we'd have LD, and maybe LD could be like a lad. So it could be a cat was wearing a wig, so it would look like a lad. And then the piece that's there is white and red, and that goes, and that goes back to our buffer. And so since that was our first cycle and it goes back to our buffer, we don't memorize the letter for that. So even though this would be B, we don't memorize that letter because it's our first cycle and it's going back to our buffer. And so instead, we need to cycle break to a piece that we haven't visited yet. So we haven't yet visited this piece back here, which is A. So I'm going to cycle break into here and memorize the letter A. And then the piece that's there is red and yellow, which goes to here because red and yellow. So that's M and O. So I have A, O. Maybe I could have the Australian Open, which is a tennis tournament. So it would be the CT cat was wearing a WG wig to look like a LD lad at the AO Australian Open. And then the piece that's there is green and yellow. So that would go to here because green and yellow. And that's IJK. So we'd have a K, and then the piece that's there at K is green and red, and that goes to green and red. So right here, and that's IJ. So KJ, maybe we could use, there's this cuber who's named Kaijin Lin. He's good at blindfolded solving, funnily enough. So then our memorization up until this point would be the CT cat was wearing a WG wig to look like a LD lad at the cycle break to AO Australian Open to impress KJ Kaijin Lin. And then the piece that's there is blue and orange, and so that goes to blue and orange, so right here, and that is QR. So we'd have an R, and then the piece that's there is white and blue, so that goes white and blue, so right here, which is A. And since that's where we cycle broke to for our second cycle, we do memorize that letter for the end of the cycle. So RA could maybe be a race. And so if we add that onto our memo, then our memo would be the CT cat was wearing a WG wig to look like a LD lad at the AO Australian Open to get into KJ Kaijin Lin's RA race. So the cat was wearing a wig to look like a lad at the Australian Open so he could get into Kaijin Lin's race. That's pretty wild memo. So now that we've memorized both the corners and the edges, then I reckon that we can go on to execution. So in a solve, this is where you would put your blindfold on. But for this example, I'm just gonna show you guys and we can both have our eyes open. And to start off with, we'll solve the edges and then we'll solve the corners after that. First of all, in our memorization, we had C, which is right here. So we have to set up C to our target position so that it can swap with our buffer and solve that piece, C. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to do a wide L2, and that brings it down to back here, and then a D, and then an L2. And so that brings C up to our target position. And then we can do that swapping algorithm for edges, the T-perm, and then we undo the setup moves that we did. So since we did fat L2, D, L2, we're gonna do the reverse of that. So L2, and then the reverse of D is D prime, and the reverse of fat L2 is just another fat L2. And so that solved the first letter of our edge memorization, C. And the second letter was T, as like the second part of cat. And so T is back here, and we have to set that up to our target position. And so how we're gonna do that is we're gonna do a wide D2 like that to bring it around to here, and then an L prime to bring it up to the target position. So we can swap our buffer, and using that bow analogy, it can shoot over to here at the target position. So we do the swapping algorithm to shoot the bow, and then since we did a wide D2 and an L prime, the reverse of L prime is L, and the reverse of wide D2 is another wide D2. And so that solved the second letter of our edge memorization, T. And then next up in our memorization, it was a wig, because the cat was wearing a wig. And so the first letter of that was W. So W is back here, and how we can set that up to our target position is doing a D like that, and then an L2. And then I'll set it up for us to do the swapping algorithm, the T-perm, and then undo the setup moves. So L2 and D prime, and that solved W. And now we have the second half of wig, which is the G, and how we can set that up to our target position is we can do an L to bring it back to here, and then a wide D, sort of like that, and then an L prime, and that put it right here. So I'll just show you that one more time because it's a little bit of a complicated one. So in order to set up G right here up to the target position, we can do an L move, and that brings it to here. And then while holding on to sort of these pieces, we can do a wide D, and that brings it to here, and then an L prime, and that puts it at the target position right here. And then we can do the swapping algorithm, the T-perm, and then we have to undo the setup moves that we did. We first have to do the reverse of L prime, which is L, and then the reverse of wide D, which is wide D prime, and then the reverse of L, which is L prime. And that solved G. So after the cat was wearing a wig, it was to look like a lad, so LD. Alright, so first up we have to swap our buffer with L in order to solve it. And how we're going to do that is we're going to set up L with an L prime to our target position, and then do the swapping algorithm. And then we're going to undo the setup move that we did, which was L prime, so now we do an L. And that solved L. And now since the cat was wearing a wig to look like a lad, we did the L, and now we have to do the D of the lad. And so since D is already set up in our target position, we can just straight up do the swapping algorithm. We don't need to do any setups. Easy as. And so now what was next was the cat was wearing a wig to look like a lad, and he was at the Australian Open. And so that was for AO. So first up we have to do A back here, and how we're going to do that without disrupting these three pieces is we're going to do a fat L2 like that, which brings it to here. So fat L2 brings it down to here, and then D prime, which brings it to over here, and then L2, and that puts it in that target location. So we do the swapping algorithm, and then we undo. So we did a wide L2, D prime, and L2. So we first undo the L2, we undo the D prime with a D, and then we undo the wide L2 with another wide L2. And then we have the O from Australian Open. This one, it's not a very nice case to try and set it up to that target position, but what we can do is we can do a D prime to bring it across to here, and then we can do a fat L to bring it to back here, and then we can do a D move to bring it to the side here, and then we can do an L2 move to bring it to the top here. And that didn't disrupt these three pieces, but now when we do the swapping algorithm and we undo the setups, so we need to do an L2 and then undo the D with a D prime, and then undo the fat L with a fat L prime, and then undo the D prime with a D. And then that solves the letter O. And so it was the cat was wearing a wig to look like a lad at the Australian Open to get into Kai-Jun Lin's race. And so the start of Kai-Jun Lin was a K. So now we have to get K up to that target position. And how we're going to do that is we're going to do a fat L. There's a lot of fat moves, wide moves, and that's just because we kind of have to when we're not allowed to affect these three pieces. It's just the best way to do it. So we have to do a fat L to bring it to back here, and then a D move to bring it around to there, and then an L2. And that put it up in the target position. And then we can do the swapping algorithm, and then we have to undo the setup moves that we did. So the last setup move we did was an L2, and before that it was a D, so we have to undo with a D prime, and before that it was a fat L, so now we have to do a fat L prime. And that solved K. And the second half of Kaijin Lin was the J. So now we have to set up J to our target position. And we're going to do that by doing sort of a D2 to put it up the back here, and then an L to put it into that target position. And all of this is without affecting this, by the way. And then we do the swapping algorithm, the TPAM, and then we have to undo. So since we did a D2 and then L, we now have to do an L prime and a D2 to undo that. And next in the memo, we have race, so RA. So first up in that, we have R, so we need to set up R to that target position, and R is right here. And so that's a pretty easy setup to the target position right here. You could probably guess it's just an L, and that puts it at that target position for us to swap with our buffer. So we can do that edges swapping algorithm, and then we can undo that. And then the second half of race was A. And so now we need to set up A over to our target location. And surely I can just do U prime like that, right? Just move it over. But no, you can't, because you can't affect these three pieces. And if we do a U prime, then that puts them over there. But we can't do that. We can't do any move that affects these pieces. So U moves, they're not allowed for setting up in edges. So instead, we have to do sort of a fat L2 to bring it down to here, and then a D prime to bring it over to here, and then an L2 to bring it up to that target location. And all of that didn't affect these three pieces. Now we can do the swapping algorithm, the TPAM, and we can undo. So undo the L2 with another L2, undo the D prime with a D, and undo the fat L2 with a fat L2. And that solves all of our edges, which is really nice. And now at this point in the solve, after doing edges, we need to ask ourselves, did we have a single letter in our memorization? Because if so, then we need to do that parity algorithm right now. But our memorization didn't have any single letters left at the end, so we don't need to do the parity alg, and we can just go on to corners. And so remember, our memorization for corners was there was a Dw2 in a VH vehicle that was DB dabbing at the CM cucumber. So now we need to actually execute that. And remember, our target location for corners is right here. So we have to set up whatever letter we get with right here, and then do the swapping algorithm, and then undo the setup move. So our first letter was T in Dw2, and so T is right here for corners. And so what we can do to set that up to here is just a simple D prime like that. And then we can do the swapping algorithm, and then we can undo the setup move that we did at the start. So we did a D prime, so now we have to do a D. And that solved our first letter. And it was a Dw2, so now we have U, which is right here. And how we can set that up to our target location right here without affecting these three pieces, remember, is we can do an F prime. And so that puts this piece right here, we do an F prime, and it puts it to our target location right here. Very good. And we can do the swapping algorithm and undo, and that solves that location. And so next we had vehicle, which was VH, and so V is UV. So V is right here, and how we can set that up to here, it's not already set up because V is here, not here. So it's very important that we're looking at which side of the piece it is, not just the fact that it's the whole piece. So we have V here, and we need to set it up to here. And this one's actually a little bit tricky, but there's a very cool way to do it, where you do an R prime to put it to back here. So V, watching V, you go R prime to right here, and then you do D prime to into here. So if you have V trying to set it up to the side here for the target position, you can do R prime, D prime, and that sets that up. And then you can do the swapping algorithm for corners, which is that modified Y perm, and then you can undo. So you did R prime, D prime, now you have to do D, R, and that solved V. And next we had H, because it was a vehicle, and how we can set that up to our target location here is we can simply just do a D2, and that brings it in right there. And then we can do the swapping algorithm. We've done that swapping algorithm heaps now, so should be getting quite comfortable with it. And then we can undo the setup move, which since we did a D2, the reverse of that is just D2 again. and that solves H. And so the 2 in the vehicle was dabbing, so that would be DB. So next we have D, and we have to set that up to the target location, which is right here. And how we can set that up to our target location right here is we can do an F prime to bring it to right here, and then we can do a D2, which brings it to right here, and then we can do an R, and that brings it to our target location without affecting these 3 pieces. So I'll just show you that one more time because it's a bit of a tricky one. So D right here, you can do F prime, that brings it to here, and then D2, which brings it to right here, and then R, and that sets up D to the target location. So now we can do the swapping algorithm. And so remember our setup was F prime D2 R, so now we have to do R prime D2 F, the exact reverse. So now we have the second half of dabbing, which was B, and so B is right here. So we have to set this up to our target location, which we can do with R to bring it back here, and then D prime to move it into here. And then we can do the swapping algorithm, and then we can undo what we did at the start. So we did R D prime, so now we would do D R prime. And the 2 in the vehicle was dabbing at something. It was dabbing at a cucumber, which was CM. So first of all, we have to do C, which is right here. And how we can set that up to the target position down here is we can use an F. And so that brings the top down to the side here, and it doesn't affect these 3 pieces. And then we can do the swapping algorithm, and then we can undo the F move that we did. So the opposite of F is just F prime. And then finally, we have M for the second half of cucumbers. So M is right here on the right side of this piece, and how we can set it up to the target location here without affecting these 3 pieces is we can simply just do an R prime, and then we can do the swapping algorithm, and then the opposite of R prime is now R. And there you have it. You just solved a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. I mean, not yet. That was an example that we did together with our eyes open. But now you're well on your way, and I hope that that helped you understand how all of the steps that you've been learning all fit together into one solve. Alright, so now that I've gone through that example, I reckon that you're ready to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. If you just want to dive right into a solve, then happy days. Just go for it. Scramble up your cube and give it a crack using everything we've learnt. But there is just one more thing you can do to build up a bit more confidence first if you would like to do that. And that is to pretty much just do a full solve, but instead of remembering your memorization, you can instead write it down. And then you can hide the cube from your sight while you're doing the actual solving, maybe put it under your desk, and start trying to follow the letters without looking at the cube. And what this does is it means you don't have to be thinking about the memorization. You only have to focus on executing correctly. So this is a nice stepping stone to a full solve. So if you want to, you can do some of those practices before moving on to a full solve. But whether you do that or not, good luck with getting your first blindfolded success. You are now equipped with everything you need to know, how to trace through the cube and make a story out of it that you can remember, and then how to use that story to solve the cube using setups and your swapping algorithms, and then parity algorithm if it is needed. I won't give you a specific scramble to attempt, but just go ahead and give a solve a crack using a random scramble. If you don't get a success, all good. You don't have to get a success on your first try, nor are you expected to. So just try again, and if you need to, again, and however long it takes you to get your first success. Just keep pushing and you can get it, I'm sure. And in order to set you off on the right foot, I'll quickly just let you know of a couple important things to know about blindfolded solving. To start off with, your cube is not allowed to have a logo, and that's because on some cubes you can feel the logo, which would give you information about the cube while you're blindfolded. So make sure you remove the logo before trying to compete officially with a cube. You've probably seen that in competition, you start your attempt with the cover still on the cube, and then you start the timer and lift the cover yourself. Then you memorize it, then you put the blindfold on and start solving, which is when a judge puts a sight blocker in between you and your cube to stop cheating. Even though I know you wouldn't cheat, but they still do it just in case. In competition, you have just 3 solves instead of 5, like for other events, and you are ranked for the round off of your best solve in the round. This is called BO3, standing for Best of 3. I really hope this video helped you learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded, and if it did, I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. I upload heaps of fun and helpful content about cubing and especially blindfolded solving, and I'm sure my tutorial and tip videos can help make you a better cuber. So thank you for diving into the world that is blindfold solving, and good luck with it and the rest of your cubing journey. See ya!